Hello. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Gonzalez, aka the Good Gut Doc. I am a naturopathic physician, and today I will be talking to you a little bit about food sensitivity testing. Food sensitivity testing seems to be all the rave. People are wanting to know, do I have a food intolerance or is it something else? I get this question brought up a lot with patients, so I will be breaking down all things related to this. Before I get started, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you never miss a video. Let's get into it. A lot of people will use the term sensitivities and intolerances interchangeably, and you can in a lot of instances, but I think we want to just make sure that we know that a sensitivity might be different from an intolerance and is definitely different from an allergy. So let's break all of this down. Let's use dairy as an example. A lot of people will say that they have a dairy sensitivity when they actually have lactose intolerance. Lactose intolerance is basically when you lack the enzyme called lactose, or lactase, I should say, that helps break down lactose. So when you lack this enzyme in your gut, you're not going to break down that lactose, which is a milk sugar, quite efficiently, so that can lead to unwanted GI symptoms like gas, bloating, cramping, diarrhea, etc., etc. So this is different from, say, a sensitivity, which you might still have the lactase enzyme. You're just responding negatively to the dairy, the proteins usually in dairy. And that typically could be casein, it could be whey, it could be different proteins found within dairy. Sometimes I will even have patients do a lactate challenge to sort of differentiate between lactose intolerance versus a dairy sensitivity. And basically, if they have less symptoms when they take the lactate with dairy, then we can probably assume they have lactose intolerance versus a dairy sensitivity. However, if their symptoms are unchanged with taking lactate, which is basically the enzyme to help you digest dairy, then you might just have a dairy sensitivity or an allergy. There are specific tests that you can do to test for lactose intolerance, such as doing a lactose breath test. But in my opinion, it's probably easier just to try eliminating it from your diet and then reintroducing it and see what the reaction is. And again, you can also go ahead and do that lactate challenge. Let's talk about the difference between food sensitivities and food allergies, because they are different. So as you may know, an allergy may show up immediately after consuming that said food. So you might actually present with visible hives, itching, you might feel a tingling sensation around your mouth, your lips might start to feel swollen, and in worst case scenario, you might develop anaphylaxis, where you actually feel your throat constricting and you start having trouble breathing. Anaphylaxis is a life-threatening condition, so if you at all suspect that you have this, definitely talk to your doctor or an allergist and make sure you have an EpiPen on hand at all times. Allergies are mediated by IgE antibodies versus food sensitivities, which are typically mediated by IgG or IgG4 antibodies. So from a symptom standpoint, sensitivities have typically more of a delayed onset, and they're not usually going to appear the same as allergies. So with a food sensitivity, again, you might develop symptoms maybe an hour, a couple hours. Some people even experience some days after consuming said food. And the symptoms tend to be a little bit more vague, kind of non-specific. So you can definitely experience GI symptoms. The primary one a lot of people experience is bloating or abdominal cramping, maybe loose stool. Some people get constipated too. Others will develop heartburn, reflux. Others describe feeling just general like achy, fatigue, brain fog. So they're more non-specific symptoms, and they tend to be more delayed. Another key difference between food sensitivities and food allergies is how we're actually testing for them. So if you suspect a food allergy, then you might go see an allergist, and they might do skin prick testing where they prick you with a bunch of different allergens and they look for a response or a welt, something like that. There are also food allergy blood panels that can test for IgE reactions to different foods. Food sensitivity testing, however, on the other hand, is typically done through blood serum testing. And that's basically when you take a specific test kit that you get from your practitioner, you bring it to get drawn for, they draw your blood, and then it will show IgG and or IgG4 mediated food reactions. And it will show you from a scale usually from mild to severe the where you lie in regards to each food sensitivity. And there are so many different panels out there, and I'll mention some possibly at the end. None of this is sponsored. You don't have to worry about that. But typically it looks for a lot of the common sensitivities. Definitely you'll see them be testing for gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, nuts, seeds, eggs, soy, different spices, different meats, things like that. I have had people bring me hair sensitivity test results or ask me about hair sensitivity testing. And I just don't think that there's enough information out there to show that hair testing for food sensitivity is accurate. So I don't recommend that. I typically recommend going with a blood serum testing for food sensitivities. Let's talk about the pros and cons that come with testing for food sensitivities. So I have this conversation with almost every single patient. A lot of them are really excited because they want to figure out once and for all what's causing their GI symptoms. So they think the answer to that is doing a food sensitivity panel. And while in some cases that may help reveal certain foods that may be aggravating their symptoms, I always just want to make sure that they understand exactly what the test means, what the test results could imply. And yeah, so let's just go through some pros and cons with doing a food sensitivity panel. Let's go through maybe some pros first. So I already mentioned that doing a panel like this can let you know possibly some foods that you may be reacting to, that you may have not have thought of, that may have not been on your radar, can eliminate the need to do a food elimination challenge, which can, save you a lot of time. Some other pros would be that it can also give you an insight into your gut barrier health. So if you're having a lot of sensitivities come up, moderate or severe, and I'm talking like more than 10, that gives us insight that you probably have some leaky gut going on or some gut permeability occurring, which is probably the reason that you're seeing a lot of these food sensitivities show up, right? Because again, we're not just testing the foods themselves, we're looking at your immune response against these foods. So if you have leaky gut, that means food particles are getting past that gut barrier, mounting an immune response and creating these antibodies. So again, that can then lead us to really support that gut barrier and gut lining more aggressively. So now let's talk about some cons related to the food sensitivity testing. So there's been some controversy regarding the accuracy and validity of some of these tests. So, I mean, again, there's question as to if you were to do the same test twice in a row, would the same sensitivity show up each time? And there have been some inconsistencies there in the past. I want to say that the testing is getting a little bit better, but again, we always just want to let patients know nothing is 100%. The other con is, again, how are we interpreting the test results? Because just because you have a lot of these antibodies showing up, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't tolerate these foods. And often patients will tell me, I eat eggs all day long and I do not have any sensitivities and no adverse reactions, but this test is telling me that I have severe egg sensitivity, right? So yeah, it's a little bit iffy, right? The validity and interpreting the results and what they actually mean. Another con of doing sensitivity testing is that it can really restrict your diet. So if you're doing a test and you see 10 sensitivities come up as moderate to severe, and those are foods that are a normal part of your diet, then you're going to be extremely restricted with your diet. And this can trigger unhealthy eating patterns for people. It may trigger an eating disorder. And it can be very overwhelming. And that's something that I try to limit how much people have to restrict in their diet, because that, again, it's very overwhelming, and I just prefer patients not restrict unnecessarily if they don't need to. And then finally, the last con I have on my list is that the testing can be costly. Insurance typically does not cover for food sensitivity testing, so you're looking at anywhere from $100 to possibly $400 per panel. The one that I typically order is US Biotech, and that one is around, I want to say $200. Don't quote me on that. So yes, it can be costly. Kind of go through the pros and the cons with each patient, and then basically ask them, what do you want to do, right? Because I personally leave food sensitivity testing as my very last resort if we're either not really getting any other answers or any other things pointing to the patient's symptoms, because oftentimes there are other things that can be corrected that will actually help improve those food intolerances, right? Which one of them I already mentioned is leaky gut. Another common one is SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. They probably have some dysbiosis or bacterial imbalance going on. Maybe they have deficiency of good bacteria. And so I would do maybe a GI MAPSUL analysis to first figure out what imbalances there lie versus, again, just jumping to a food sensitivity test. And I know that might seem kind of backwards, but it's not the foods themselves that are causing the issue. There's something else underlying that is causing you to react to these foods, right? The foods aren't the problem here, right? Unless like you're getting a lot of pesticides and glyphosate exposure from non-organic food, then that could be the issue there. But for the most part, it's not the foods. There's something else driving that imbalance. And personally, as a naturopathic doctor, we are trained to figure out the root cause of your symptoms and not just take things away and hope that you feel better. So what is the best way to figure out which foods you're sensitive or intolerant to? The gold standard is actually doing a food elimination challenge, which a lot of people don't want to hear because it does take more time. It takes more work on your part to figure out which foods you want to eliminate first. So, but it is a gold standard, right? Because you'll know right away, even from a symptom standpoint, which foods are making your symptoms worse. The way that I advise going about a food elimination challenge is starting with a couple of food groups to eliminate. I wouldn't necessarily go full blown and eliminate the top 6 or 7 food sensitivities, which again are wheat, dairy, corn, eggs, soy, nuts, and yeah, I think those are all of them, or the top. Because again, that can feel very overwhelming and you're not likely to stick to that diet very long. So maybe you start with eliminating dairy and gluten for about 1 or 2 months. I believe for gluten, you should do that a little bit longer, more like 2 to 3 months to really see, how you're feeling at that point. And then what you want to do is have a reintroduction period, but you want to, again, do one food group at a time. So if you gave up dairy and gluten for 2 to 3 months and you're ready to reintroduce, start with one at a time. So maybe start with gluten and eat a good amount of gluten. Have yourself some pasta, some pizza, and see how you feel over the course of that week. If you feel like your symptoms are getting a lot worse, maybe they had improved and now they're coming back, or if you are getting a lot worse, then you have your answer, right? And then you would repeat the same thing, but with dairy. And once you figure that out and you eliminate those foods, then we can continue working on your gut health, your gut barrier, your microbiome. And once you're at a really good place, we can talk about gradually reintroducing those foods because, again, you may be able to better tolerate them once we've addressed those other imbalances. So I hope this video answered some of your questions regarding food sensitivity testing, how they differ from allergies, and also how you might want to just do a food elimination challenge to get to the bottom of your food sensitivities. And the best part of it is that it's free. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe, and I will be making more videos of the like soon to come. Thank you, and take care of yourselves.